You wake to the sound of rain. Not a passing shower, not an afternoon storm. The sky is gray. The ground beneath you is already wet. Smoke from last night's fire has disappeared into the wind. Every piece of wood you can find feels damp in your hands. You are hungry. You still need water. You still need food. You still need warmth. But outside, everything has changed. Today feels impossible, except this is not one day. Sometimes it lasted for an entire week. Archaeologists know that prehistoric humans survived through repeated periods of heavy rainfall long before they had permanent houses, waterproof clothing, or stored food. In many parts of Africa, Europe, and Asia, entire seasons could become dangerously wet. Yet your ancestors survived every one of them. And once you understand how they did it, you begin to see rain as something completely different. For most people today, rain is an inconvenience. For ancient humans, it was a force that could erase footprints, flood camps, extinguish fire, and make hunting almost impossible. A single week of nonstop rain could decide whether an entire group lived or died. But that assumption hides something unexpected. Because in many cases, rain did not simply threaten prehistoric humans. It also created opportunities that only the best survivors knew how to exploit. That changes how you see one of nature's oldest enemies. Around 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens were already living across eastern Africa. The climate was unpredictable. Lake levels rose and fell. Grasslands expanded, then disappeared. Storm systems shifted for years at a time. Researchers studying ancient sediments from places like the East African Rift have found repeated wet and dry cycles that shaped human evolution itself. Rain was never unusual. It was expected. The first challenge arrived almost immediately. Shelter. Modern humans often imagine prehistoric people sitting beneath trees. That works for an afternoon. It does not work for 7 days. Leaves drip constantly after heavy rain. Branches fall more easily when soaked. The ground beneath trees becomes thick mud. In some forests, lightning also strikes tall trees more frequently than open rock shelters. Your ancestors understood this without weather forecasts. They searched for something better. One of the greatest discoveries in prehistoric archaeology comes from caves across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Sites like Blombos Cave, Kafsa Cave, and Shanidar Cave preserve evidence showing humans repeatedly returned to natural rock shelters over tens of thousands of years. Some occupations lasted only days, others returned generation after generation. The reason was simple: stone does not leak. A cave blocks wind. Rock walls retain warmth. Most importantly, they protect fire. But caves created another problem. You were rarely alone. Cave bears, hyenas, wolves, leopards, and lions often use the exact same shelters. Evidence from Chauvet Cave and Vindija Cave shows different species occupying caves during different periods. Finding shelter sometimes meant entering another predator's home. Rain forced difficult choices: stay outside and risk hypothermia, or enter darkness where something else might already be waiting. Except there was another challenge that arrived before sunset: fire. According to archaeologist Richard Wrangham, controlled fire transformed human evolution by making food safer, improving nutrition, and allowing activity after dark. But fire has one weakness: water. A soaked landscape makes starting new fires extremely difficult. Ancient humans did not carry disposable lighters. They depended on preserving existing flames whenever possible. Evidence from sites like Wonderwork Cave suggests humans were using controlled fire nearly 1 million years ago. That means they likely developed strategies for protecting it long before modern technology. One possibility comes from ethnographic studies of recent hunter-gatherers. Groups such as the Hadza and several indigenous Australian communities often carried slow-burning embers instead of starting entirely new fires every day. A glowing coal wrapped inside dry plant material can survive surprisingly long if protected correctly. Instead of creating fire again, you keep yesterday's fire alive. Even during rain, inside shelters, fires were probably kept smaller. Large flames consume fuel quickly. Small fires produce steady heat while conserving precious dry wood. Finding that wood became the next challenge. At first glance, everything looks soaked. Branches snap with a wet sound, logs feel heavy, nothing burns. But forests are not uniformly wet. Dead branches trapped high inside standing trees often remain surprisingly dry because dense leaves block direct rainfall. The undersides of fallen logs can also stay protected. Experienced hunter-gatherers learn where dryness hides. Rain fools the inexperienced, not the expert. In 1999, anthropologist Kim Hill documented how skilled foragers consistently located usable fuel in environments that appeared completely saturated. Knowledge mattered more than strength. You did not gather random wood, you gathered the right wood. That difference determined whether children stayed warm that night, but warmth alone could not solve the next problem. Food. After several days of continuous rain, hunting changes completely. Large mammals move differently, tracks disappear, scents wash away, visibility drops. A wounded animal becomes harder to follow. Everything you normally rely upon becomes unreliable. At first, this seems like disaster. Then archaeologists notice something unexpected. Rain also concentrates food. Earthworms emerge, snails become active, frogs breed, fish move into flooded shallows, plants absorb fresh water, streams overflow, trapping aquatic animals in isolated pools. Some of the easiest meals of the year only exist because of rain. Modern studies of tropical hunter gatherers show that people often shift diets dramatically during wet seasons instead of stubbornly chasing the same prey. Flexibility becomes survival. At Pinnacle Point, evidence suggests prehistoric humans collected shellfish from coastal environments more than 160,000 years ago. Storms sometimes exposed entirely new feeding grounds. Heavy waves could wash shellfish loose. Tides changed access. Rain indirectly expanded food choices. Instead of fighting nature, you learned to let nature deliver food to you. But that strategy only worked if your group stayed healthy. And after nearly a week of constant rain, an invisible danger began spreading through every camp. Not hunger, not predators, something far harder to see. That invisible danger was cold, not freezing temperatures, the slow loss of body heat. Modern medicine calls it hypothermia. It can happen even in cool, rainy weather when your clothes stay wet for days. Your ancestors did not know the word. They knew the feeling: shivering, numb fingers, exhaustion. A week of rain meant clothing never fully dried and every morning began cold. Children and older adults faced the greatest risk, so survival became a group effort. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy argues that one of humanity's greatest adaptations was cooperation. People shared body heat, cared for children, gathered firewood together, and protected the sick. Archaeological evidence from Shanidar Cave shows injured Neanderthals survived for years because others cared for them. Rain made that cooperation essential, but there was another problem. Staying in one shelter for days allowed waste to build up. Damp conditions encouraged disease and parasites. Without understanding germs, prehistoric humans still learned to keep sleeping areas cleaner and move waste away from camp. Experience taught them what worked. Then the rain changed the landscape itself. Animal tracks disappeared, but so did old scents. Some animals became harder to find. Others became easier to approach because rainfall masked human footsteps. Hunters adapted instead of waiting for perfect conditions. That pattern appears throughout human history. Around 74,000 years ago, the eruption of Lake Toba reshaped climates across much of the world. Humans survived, not because they controlled nature, but because they adapted to it. The same was true after a week of rain. When the skies finally cleared, shelters had to dry, fires had to be rebuilt, and hunting began again. The world looked familiar, but it had changed. That may be the real story of rain. Your ancestors did not survive because storms were rare. They survived because they learned that every storm rewrote the rules, and every generation learned how to live by them.